The map of the world is often drawn with lines of power that we assume are dictated by modern necessity. Yet the most volatile stretch of water on our planet is haunted by a ghost. We are told that the Strait of Hormuz is the world's most critical choke point because of the black liquid that fuels our cities, a strategic bottleneck where a single spark could ignite a global depression. This is the story of energy security and 20th century geopolitics. But this narrative is a veil. It hides a deeper, more unsettling reality about how geography condemns certain coordinates to eternal cycles of predatory wealth and catastrophic violence. Long before the first oil derrick pierced the desert sand, this narrow gateway was already the site of a different kind of obsession. It was a place where a kingdom rose not from fertile soil or industrial might, but from the pure, distilled essence of location. To understand why the world still fights for this strait, we must first destabilize the idea that our current conflicts are new. We must look at the flip side of the map, where the Strait of Hormuz was once the center of a globalized gold economy that functioned with a ruthlessness that makes modern corporate warfare look amateurish. What happens when a civilization discovers that it does not need to produce anything to own everything? What is the psychological cost of living on a rock made of salt while controlling the riches of the entire known world? The answer lies in a forgotten empire that proved geography is not just destiny. It is a trap. The conventional history of the Middle East usually follows a predictable arc. Ancient Mesopotamian glory, the rise of Islamic caliphates, a long period of colonial struggle, and the sudden, transformative discovery of petroleum. In this version, the Strait of Hormuz is a secondary character, a mere geographic feature that gained importance only when the West needed a way to move crude oil from the Persian Gulf to the refineries of Europe and America. We view it as a logistical challenge, a transit zone that must be kept open at all costs. This stability illusion suggests that if we could simply move past our reliance on fossil fuels, the strategic weight of this region would evaporate, and the tensions would subside. We are led to believe that the friction here is a byproduct of the industrial age. However, this perspective ignores a structural element that has remained constant for 1,000 years. The strait has never been about what lies beneath the ground. It has always been about the toll booth. By focusing on the oil of the present, we minimize the fundamental truth that this stretch of water is a natural machine for the extraction of value. It is the original site of rentier logic, where power is derived entirely from the ability to say no to the flow of global commerce. The ignored structural element that reframes this entire history is the Kingdom of Ormuz. While the great empires of the Mongols, the Persians, and the Ottomans were clashing over vast territories, a small, rocky island in the middle of the strait managed to become one of the wealthiest spots on Earth. This island, also called Ormuz, was a geographic impossibility. It had no natural water sources. It produced no crops. It was a desolate, volcanic mound covered in layers of salt. Yet, by the 14th century, it was the clearinghouse for the entire world's luxury trade. Every gram of pepper from the Malabar coast, every thread of silk from China, and every warhorse from the Arabian Peninsula had to pass through its harbor. The rulers of Ormuz understood a secret that modern economists are still grappling with. In a connected world, the person who controls the connection owns the world. They built a society of unprecedented opulence in a place where human life should not have been able to survive. They imported their water, their food, and their soldiers, paying for it all with the microscopic margins they shaved off the world's desires. This was the first true hub of globalized capital, a place where identity was fluid and profit was the only law. It was a pirate kingdom in the most sophisticated sense, leveraging the friction of geography into a mountain of gold. This brings us to the invisible turning point that reshaped the global hierarchy. For centuries, the wealth of Ormuz flowed relatively undisturbed because no single power had the naval capacity to fully monopolize the sea. The Indian Ocean was a shared space of merchant networks, but in the early 16th century, the arrival of the Portuguese changed the structural DNA of global trade. When Afonso de Albuquerque sailed into the harbor of Ormuz in 1507, he didn't come to trade. He came to install a permanent mechanical blockage. The Portuguese didn't just want to participate in the market, they wanted to own the strait itself. This was the birth of blue water, imperialism, a systemic reorganization of power where the control of oceanic chokepoints became more valuable than the conquest of land. Albuquerque's brutality was not merely a character flaw, it was a tactical necessity to enforce a new world order. He understood that by placing a fortress at this specific coordinate, he could bleed the terrestrial empires of the East dry. The Portuguese intervention turned the Strait of Hormuz from a prosperous transit hub into a militarized zone of exclusion. It established a precedent that has never been reversed. The strait is not a public good. It is a weapon of economic strangulation. As this systemic reorganization took hold, the inhabitants of the region faced a profound hidden trade-off. To maintain their position, the elites of Ormuz had to enter into a Faustian bargain with their occupiers. They sacrificed their political autonomy for the continuation of their commercial luxury. The psychological consequence was the creation of a middleman culture, one that was perpetually vulnerable to the whims of distant superpowers. The wealth of Ormuz became a curse, making it a permanent target for anyone with a large enough fleet. The very geography that provided their riches ensured that they would never truly be at peace. This is the recurring trauma of the chokepoint. It creates a temporary, glittering prosperity that is fundamentally fragile because it relies on a flow that the locals can trigger but never truly contain. The moral implication is clear. When your entire existence is predicated on a bottleneck, you are always one blockade away from extinction. This structural fragility is not a relic of the past. It is the blueprint for the modern state of the Persian Gulf. We see the same dynamic today, where hyper-modern cities rise from the sand, fueled by a flow that is controlled by external markets and guarded by foreign navies. The expansion of this dynamic beyond its origins in the Persian Gulf signaled a fundamental shift in the architecture of the world. By the time the British and the Dutch entered the arena, the Strait of Hormuz was no longer just a place. It had become a prototype for a new kind of global sovereignty. The lesson learned by the colonial powers was that you did not need to conquer an entire continent to control its destiny. You only needed to hold its throat. This strategy was replicated in the Straits of Malacca, the Cape of Good Hope, and eventually the Suez Canal. The world was being mapped not by the cultures that inhabited it, but by the pressure points where those cultures were most vulnerable. This systemic expansion created a global network of gates, where the flow of human effort was siphoned off by those who possessed the keys. The Kingdom of Ormuz, once a vibrant civilization of merchants and poets, was reduced to a desolate, militarized outpost. The people who had mastered the art of living on a salt-covered rock were discarded as the focus shifted from spice to steel, and eventually, to the heavy crude that defines our current era. This is the hidden cost of progress, the conversion of unique cultural centers into mere points on a logistical grid. The modern structural echo of this transformation is unmistakable. Today, when we hear of tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, we are conditioned to think of state actors, international law, and the threat of global inflation. We speak of the strait as if it were a modern invention, a byproduct of the 1970s energy crisis. But the tension we feel is the vibration of an ancient machinery that has never stopped working. The same geography that allowed a medieval kingdom to extract gold from the sea now allows modern nations to hold the global economy hostage. The actors have changed, but the script remains identical. We are still trapped in the logic of the choke point. The irony is that as we strive for a world of seamless connection and digital speed, our physical reality remains tethered to these narrow, dangerous corridors of water. Our satellites and fiber optic cables can move information at the speed of light, but the physical substance of our civilization, the food, the fuel, the raw materials, must still pass through the same gates that Afonso de Albuquerque guarded with his cannons 5 centuries ago. This is the paradox of our progress. We have built a digital future on a medieval foundation of geographic vulnerability. To explore the hidden trade-offs of this reality, we must look at what was sacrificed in the name of efficiency and control. The loss is not just historical, it is psychological. We have accepted a world where the stability of our lives depends on the fragile peace of a few dozen miles of water. The moral implication is that we have outsourced our security to the most volatile regions of the planet, creating a feedback loop of intervention and resentment. The history of Ormuz shows us that when a place is defined only by its strategic value, its human value begins to erode. The salt-covered island, once a jewel in the ring of the world, is now a place of ruins and military barracks. It is a stark reminder that the flip side of global wealth is often local destruction. We have traded a world of diverse, decentralized trade for a world of centralized, high-stakes bottlenecks. This systemic reorganization has made the world more connected, yes, but it has also made it more brittle. A single grounded ship, or a rogue drone in the Strait of Hormuz, can now trigger a chain reaction that affects a farmer in Iowa or a factory worker in Shanghai. We have built a world that is incredibly efficient at moving things, but incredibly poor at managing the risks inherent in that movement. This brings us to the convergence of costs. As we reach the 90% mark of this exploration, we must return to the initial destabilizing contradiction. Is the Strait of Hormuz a source of wealth or a source of inevitable ruin? The history of the Kingdom of Gold suggests it is both, and that the two are inseparable. The wealth was the catalyst for the ruin. The geography was the invitation for the invasion. When we look at the modern world, we see the same convergence. The very resources that have brought unprecedented development to the region are the same resources that have made it a permanent battlefield. The flip side of history tells us that there is no such thing as a strategic advantage that does not eventually become a strategic liability. The golden era of Ormuz ended because it was too valuable to be left alone, and the same logic applies to our current global order. We are obsessed with securing the flow, but we rarely stop to ask if the flow itself is what is drowning us. We have become addicts of the chokepoint, dependent on a system that is designed to be fragile. In the final reflective compression of this narrative, we find ourselves standing on the same salt-covered shores as the merchants of 1500. We look out at the gray warships and the massive tankers, and we realize that we are part of the same cycle. The story of the Strait of Hormuz is not a story of oil. It is a story of the human desire to control the uncontrollable. We have spent 5 centuries trying to master this narrow stretch of water, yet it remains as dangerous and unpredictable as it was when the first Portuguese galleon appeared on the horizon. The great flip side of history is that despite all our technological advancement, we are still governed by the same ancient constraints of space and time. We are still fighting the same wars for the same coordinates, driven by the same fear of being cut off from the things we think we need. The Kingdom of Ormuz is gone. Its palaces turned to dust, and its gold long since melted down. But its ghost remains in the water, a silent witness to our recurring folly. Is the modern world truly a triumph of human ingenuity over geography? Or have we simply built a more elaborate cage around ourselves, using the same old bars of salt and stone? We celebrate our global connectivity as if it were a new dawn, but the shadows cast by the Strait of Hormuz tell a different story. They tell a story of a world that is still holding its breath, waiting for the next bottleneck to tighten. Perhaps the most uncomfortable truth of all is that we have not moved forward as much as we like to believe. We are still the same restless species, clinging to the edges of the map, terrified of what happens when the gate finally closes. The forgotten Kingdom of Gold was not a detour in history. It was the blueprint for the world we inhabit today, a world where the price of everything is determined by the fragility of the narrowest path. Geography is not just a stage for history, it is the architect of our limitations, and the Strait of Hormuz is its masterpiece of structural tension. The joya on the ring of the world has been replaced by a crown of thorns, and the cost of the transit is now paid in blood and uncertainty. We look at the map and see lines of trade, but if we look closer, we see the scars of 500 years of failed mastery. The strait remains, indifferent to the empires that rise and fall along its banks. waiting for the next power to claim a throne made of salt. In the end, the flip side of power is always the same. The more you control, the more you have to lose. The desert wind still blows over the ruins of Ormuz, carrying the scent of salt and the echo of a wealth that once felt infinite, reminding us that every kingdom built on a choke point is eventually strangled by its own success. We are left with the silence of the salt and the cold, dark weight of the water. The map is a mirror,